Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Well, Tony, we are in the college football offseason, so I assume that means everything is slowed down. There's no real news to talk about, right? Have I read that correctly?
No, Tom, you have read that way incorrectly. This is the time of year where the games may not be happening, but the gamesmanship is. This is the comings and the goings of players. And the big news that we can start off with right now is Miyan Williams announcing that he will be back at Ohio State next year. Redshirt sophomore, rushed for 800 yards. This past season, there was a question of would he leave or would he stay? And today, on Thursday, he tweets out a tweet. Let me read it for you, Tom, just so you can... it's a picture of him, and it says unfinished business. And in the social media world that we are now in, we know that means maybe you're coming back, but then he has confirmed it. So pretty good get for the Buckeyes.
It does feel like that's a big piece to have back to start building the running back room around on. And they could potentially get as many as 5 guys back. You've got Miyan Williams, Travion Henderson, Evan Pryor, Chip Trainum, and Dallin Hayden. Now, what are the odds that all 5 of those guys are on the active roster for the first game of the season? Probably not real high. But if you've got a guy who was tremendous when he was healthy this year, that's a real good piece to have to be sure you can build that room around, because we are in the college football free agency era where until a guy says definitively he is absolutely coming back, everyone's kind of on a 1-year contract right now, and no one's officially in the back in the class for the next year unless until they really affirmatively say they are. So that's one very good piece for Ohio State to have to build around.
It's interesting. He played in all but 2 games. So he played in 11 games, rushed for 825 yards, as I said. But there were, I don't know, maybe 6 of those weeks of the last 8 weeks, he wasn't healthy. Like, he missed the Michigan State game, comes back against Iowa, carries the ball 10 times for 19 yards, wasn't healthy. Next game at Penn State, 2 times for 9 yards, clearly not healthy. And then you've got the Northwestern game. Wasn't healthy then, but still carried the ball 26 times. Indiana, 15 times in the first half for 147 yards. Leaves with another injury. And then misses the Maryland game. 8 carries against Michigan, 3 carries against Georgia. Probably hasn't been healthy since Rutgers when he went for 189 yards and then missed the Michigan State game. And so this is a guy that people say he is what he is, so why not go? Why not go to the NFL? He's not going to run a 4.4. He's not 6'2". He's 5'8", and he probably runs a 4.6.5. But when he's healthy, he's really, really good. I think coming back gives him an opportunity to show that he can stay healthy. Tom, this is a guy who has just 2 games in his career of 20 carries or more, and both happened this year. And so he doesn't have to worry about tread. Like right now, like he needs to show that, you know how new tires are kind of slick and they're like, don't put them up front, don't put them on the front wheels, put them on the back wheels. He needs to wear some of that tread off and show that he can.
Well, and I think the other piece of this is not only do you want to show that you're healthy, because if you come into the NFL with a reputation that you are injury prone or you get banged up a lot, if you get banged up in camp, the team may just sort of give you the injury settlement and say la vie, because he doesn't necessarily fit the mold of the 25 carry a game NFL back. So if you're going to be a role player and they're already maybe a little concerned about your durability, the first time you get banged up, that may be enough to show you the door. The other piece of this is with the NIL thing now kind of in place in college. If you're going to go to the NFL and get cut during camp and make $75,000 and that's it, you might very well come out way ahead coming back and playing another year at Ohio State. And, even if you're more or less going to be somewhere in the low to mid six figures, and I'm just throwing a number out there. I don't know what his realistic NIL earning possibilities are. But, he is a popular player with the fan base. He has been a productive player when he has played. He seems like the kind of guy who should, he's not going to be making $5 million a year, but he's going to, he seems like he should be able to make a decent amount of money and put a little bit of money away or help his family or whatever it is. And then you can take a shot at the NFL next year. And if you have a healthy year, then you're maybe better positioned to take advantage and make a team as a backup or stay on a practice squad or whatever it is. So yeah, this feels like normally we would say running backs, when you have a chance to go, you go. The math on that may have changed a little bit now with NIL and with the opportunity to maybe make six figures and continue to, prove yourself a little bit more at the college level.
I was just looking at, he carried the ball 128 times this year. Blake Corum had a stretch this season where he had 115 carries in 4 games. Just to give you an idea of the different workloads that the two of them had on their shoulders. But getting Miyan Williams back, and this was a room that this year went through everybody, and even including Xavier Johnson. We haven't even mentioned him in this discussion. He could be back next year if he wants to be. You've got all of these guys, and at different points, you're down to Chip Trayanum starting against Michigan. And now if Miyan Williams is back, and he's confirmed that he is, you're starting a new quarterback. You're going to have new offensive linemen. This is significant for Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. Yeah, sure, those guys have Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka and Julian Fleming. But to have Miyan Williams back, and we'll find out more about, Travion Henderson, that sort of thing. But for that new quarterback to have a reliable runner right out of the gate to know that is going to be there, and you can start to work a rapport with, that is significant for those guys as well.
Oh, absolutely. You want as a quarterback, other than a good left tackle, one of your best friends as a new starting quarterback is a good running game that takes a lot of the pressure off you, and maybe doesn't let teams just do what they did against air raid. Mike Leach's air raid, and we'll just rush 3 and drop 8, and you're just constantly trying to fit into the tiny windows. If you've got the chance to run the ball, stay on schedule, get yourself into the 2nd and 4, 3rd and 1 kind of situations, that opens up a whole lot of other stuff that isn't necessarily there normally for you. So, yeah, for Kyle McCord, for Devin Brown, for whoever it ends up being starting for Ohio State this fall, having a Miyan Williams, and you don't need to get all 5 guys back, but if you have Miyan Williams and Travion Henderson back, or Miyan Williams and Dallin Hayden back, or Miyan Williams and Dallin Hayden and Evan Pryor back, or whatever the combination ends up being. And Xavier Johnson absolutely belongs in that conversation because I think you saw what kind of a playmaker he can be. That is a huge, huge asset for them, especially because they didn't sign a running back so far in that 2023 class. So that is, you don't have the guy who's, riding onto the scene and potentially ready to save the day or provide some depth. That's even bigger to have an extra guy back now for next year.
And we will find out about the rest of the guys. Dallin Hayden tweeted yesterday, I'm truly humbled by how God continues to bless me. What a year. Can't wait to see what blessings year 2 brings. Earn work develop, #go Bucks. So that would seem to indicate that he would also be back at Ohio State. But is it, this is the world we live in now where the default expectation is that a decision needs to be made and announced. And we're all just in a holding pattern. We can't say that Ohio State's going to have 5 scholarship running backs returning because we need to hear it from everybody. And it used to just be, let's find out and see who's turning pro. Now it's, you got to find out who's turning pro. You got to find out who's heading to the portal. And you can't assume everybody is back. And it's a different world, and you're just sitting here waiting like, well, I guess once we hear from Travion, then we will know. And for this show, we've never really put people. We don't like to put people in the portal. It's almost like the game has put everybody in the portal, and then we can bring them out once they say I'm staying. It's just a weird situation.
Yeah, everyone's just sort of in limbo right now. It's just you're in this like middle ground where you're not quite back yet until you say you're back, but you're not gone yet either. And I think there's a lot of guys on the team who, I don't think Marvin Harrison is going anywhere. I don't think Emeka Ibuka is going anywhere. I don't think Kyle McCord or Devin Brown is going anywhere right now. I mean, I think there's a lot of guys you can sort of safely assume Luke Whippler is probably going to be back. But, anytime you're at a skill position and you're not a starter, or you're you're a guy who's been there for a couple of years and hasn't really cracked the starting rotation, I think the sort of the default assumption is, well, maybe you never know, because there's just sort of a profile of guys. And Dallin Hayden, frankly, as a guy who was a true freshman and a significant contributor and, the leading carrier or rusher in terms of running backs in the college football playoff, he should be someone who you just kind of go, yeah, well, he'll be back. But, you got the thing with his dad played at Tennessee and all that stuff, and is Tennessee going to throw a huge bag at him? You get enough rumors that everyone feels like they have to reconfirm, and yeah, it's annoying for us as we're trying to project things forward. Imagine what it's like to be a staff member and go, well, yes, we have 5 healthy scholarship running backs on the roster, maybe 6 if you include Xavier Johnson. How many are we going to have? Are we going to have a pair and a spare by the time the fall rolls around? Probably, maybe. I think so.
I think when they expand all of the coaching staffs and you're inventing new positions, I think one of the new positions that may need to be invented is the guy from the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory that is like working for Wonka, but trying to convince all of the other kids who have the golden ticket to give him the secret recipe. So you're going to have a guy on staff who pretends he's like a go-between from other staffs, so that you can figure out and find out where the loyalty of all these players are. Because if they tell you, like, I'm not interested, I'm not going anywhere, then you've got somebody. But if you've got guys that are listening, then you got to watch out. Now, is this ethical? Yes, 100%.
Boy, college football personnel management and CIA asset management have gotten a lot closer in style and technique over the last few years. Yeah, making NIL payments at like dead drop locations. Like if you see the mailbox at the corner of Neal and 17th is marked with 2 pieces of chalk, 2 chalk marks, go to the bench over by the Kraken power plant and pick up your NIL dread drop payment at midnight on Tuesday. Like, okay, cool. Well, this is how this is now. And, every time we talk about personnel stuff, I keep thinking to myself the same thing. I think Mark Mantoni needs a raise. Like, I don't know how he's managing. Like, you're doing the high school stuff, and he's done the high school stuff at a very high level for a long time. You get the portal stuff. Like, man, I don't know how you do that, how you manage all that, and don't go completely insane. So, it feels like that personnel director type of role is only getting more important right now in college football. And you look at what those guys get paid, and it is not what the strength coaches get paid. It's not what the position coaches get paid. It feels like that is. The college football program's always looking for additional places to spend money. That might not be a bad place to splash the pot and make sure you keep the guy who is good at what he does.
I can see a personnel guy, and it's a dark. You're in a dark room, it's not well lit, and somebody is being waterboarded, and you've got a personnel guy going, "Did Auburn contact you? How much is off? How much did Auburn offer you?" And you find ways to get the information, but as we know, information that you get from torture is not always accurate. So you'll just have to wait to see it on Twitter, and then you'll know whether it's accurate or not.
Michigan taking their spring break trip to Gitmo this year. Why? Oh, don't you worry about that, friends. Don't you worry about that.
Nothing to see here. But while we are talking about the portal time, let's talk about a couple of movers and shakers in the Ohio State sphere, adding Syracuse safety Jihad Carter, 6'2", 198 pounds, a 3-year starter for Syracuse, still technically has 2 years left because of the COVID year, but is a guy at 36 tackles last year, plays all over the place in the secondary for Syracuse. You can see him I guess PFF had a breakdown, and the majority of his snaps, like maybe 55 or 60%, were in the slot. But he can play a strong safety, deep safety. He'll come up as like Sonny Styles was playing a quasi linebacker against Georgia. He can do that. He can play up close in the box as well. But you look what Ohio State has and what they don't have. It seems to me like if he can hold up in the slot, that would be a significant addition for the Buckeyes. And it's not a guaranteed starting job because you also have Cameron Martinez there, but it's a guy to compete with Cameron Martinez. And we know when they go to the portal, they expect those guys to win a job, but they're not going to give them the job.
Right. That has been the track record, is those guys who have come in have more or less all been contributors / starters. And that's what Tanner McAllister did last year, was they weren't sure who they were going to have play that sort of nickel slot corner kind of role. And he was a guy who came in and did that. And Jahad Carter was listed as the boundary safety for Syracuse. And if you watch the morning show from 2 days ago, this news broke as Kevin and I were recording. So we're trying to process in real time where he's going to go. And he was listed as the boundary safety, which was like, I don't know that that's the safety position where they have a real hole. And then you saw the snap count thing later from PFF, and it's like, I see. And yeah, he feels like he fits in there at that nickel role, replacing Tanner McAllister. And then, is it him? Is it Cam Martinez? Is it some combination of those guys? Are they both healthy day one? I mean, these are the kind of calculations that I think Ohio State fans are sort of getting used to making as well. If you have two, maybe you'll have one by the time the season's halfway over. But yeah, that is a very, very big addition. A guy with 3 years of starting experience, as you said. He was honorable mention All AACC last year. Had 3 picks. Had a fumble return for a touchdown from 90 yards. That's what you're looking for. If he can cover some of those slot guys, provide you some quality snaps there, quality reps there, whether it's as a starter or as a rotational player or a backup or whatever. That has felt like one of these sort of big holes on this team is, if not Cam Martinez, then who in the nickel spot? And that, with the other thought was maybe you move a corner over there. Well, we'll get to in a minute about a corner who's leaving, so you don't have quite as much depth at the corner position. So that does feel like a very, very big addition on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and I checked in with an NFL guy to get a breakdown on him, and he went to his Atlantic region scout and said, the quote is, our guy thought he was a corner, plays too aggressive at times, is a willing tackler, can be good, but needs to play with more discipline. And when they say our guy thought he was a corner, I think that's the projection of like, we think he can play corner. So if you've got a 6'2" safety who is good enough to play corner, then you would think, well, maybe that slot works out for him. Now we know sometimes you want a quicker, smaller guy, but it doesn't always have to be that guy. We saw Sean Wade do that and did it very, very well in 2019. So you just got a guy that can also help out in the run, which he does, and we'll see how that goes. But it was one of those guys, as soon as he hit the portal, he was pretty quickly linked to Ohio State. And now this is somebody that Ohio State fans can not get upset about the Buckeyes striking out on. So good job.
And really, isn't that what it's all about? Not being upset in January, and there's a couple offensive linemen they're still kind of actively chasing, trying to fill that tackle spot. So don't worry, there may still be more stuff you can get upset about in the coming days and/or weeks. So keep the faith. We'll all get through this together.
Well, let's talk about something people can get upset about, and that's J.K. Johnson, Ja'Kalen Johnson, cornerback, redshirt freshman cornerback, jumping into the portal, which kind of came out of the blue. I know some people have said that he had like a foot out the door for a while, and to see him, the opportunities that he had this year, I think he still finished with the second most snaps among the Ohio State cornerbacks this year. And to lose that guy, even though he played much better in the first half of the season than the second half of the season, I don't know whether things got to him where he got overwhelmed or what was going on with him, but he did not play well towards the second half of the season. And so he hits the portal. I was pretty surprised by that because that's a guy that you're counting on to compete for a job. He was looking to be one of the top 3 guys next year with Denzel Burke and Jordan Hancock. And that class is finally going to get an opportunity to get out there and play together. I don't know if he felt he got jumped by Jair Brown, or he's just ready to go someplace else, go back home or go, play wherever. But he is now in the portal, and Ohio State is down a corner.
Yeah, he was not someone who would necessarily have fit the profile of the guy who leaves after 2 seasons. Normally, the guy who leaves after 2 seasons is the guy who's not in the 2 deep. And J.K. Johnson was definitely in the 2 deep, but he wasn't necessarily going to be a starter next year. It feels like he was behind Jordan Hancock and behind Denzel Burke, and I don't think he played a whole heck of a lot in the Peach Bowl. And there are definitely people who will tell you that Jair Brown had jumped him. So if you're the 3rd-year guy and you started 5 games next year, but then you're maybe on track to maybe start fewer than 5 games this upcoming season. Yeah, I mean, everyone who Ohio State recruits, and not literally everyone, but most of the guys who Ohio State recruits, they're recruiting from the top of the high school ranks. And I would imagine that if you really gave everyone some truth serum, again, let's do some extraordinary rendition to those CIA black sites that all these college football teams are running right now. Let's give everyone some truth serum as they are putting pen to paper on early signing day and say, how many years are you going to be in college? And then what are you going to do after that? I would think the vast, vast majority of them are going to say 3 and then off to the NFL to be a first-round draft pick. And based on the track record of players at Ohio State, that is not an outrageous thing to assume. Sure, not everyone does, but I will. I think that's kind of the mindset of a lot of guys coming in. So if you're entering your 3rd season and now you're potentially in line to take a step back and not necessarily start as much as you did last year, or you feel like maybe you've gotten jumped by someone behind you, it's not a shock to see someone like that transfer. He was not someone, I think everyone kind of has in the back of their minds, like, here's the type of player who might be transferring, and you sort of have a list in your head of, like, this would not surprise me. He would not have been anywhere close to the top of that list, but it was like, when you saw it was kind of, it wasn't a complete shock, and it was, you understood where he was coming from.
You mentioned the 3 years or whatever. When you see these guys commit on television or during their commitment ceremonies, they say, for the next 3 to 4 years. Mm-hmm. They rarely say 5. I did see a kid earlier this week say for the next 4 to 5 years or 3. So he made sure to mention the 3 part. After he's like, he was humble enough to say maybe this takes 5 years, but then he went back to, but come on, it's really going to just be 3. I wonder at what point players now start to be like, for the next 1 to 5 years, I'm taking my talents too, because which of these kids, which of these players, these men can say for the next 3 years definitively, I am going to be anywhere? Because for one, you don't know that. For 2, you may get passed on. Like you may get pushed out the door, and coaches are much more willing to do that now, because players, I've said many times, players now have the control. The image of control is placed with the players, so coaches can use that to push them out and go gain control as you go do it at another school. And so I don't know, maybe it would be humbling, the player's humbling himself to think that he will be somewhere for 3 years.
Yeah, it is. I mean, honestly, I think if everyone is extremely honest, they would come in and say, well, for the next, I don't know, 6 months or so, and then we'll see how it goes. We'll see how spring ball goes, and then who needs a tight end over the summer. And yeah, this is one of these things where I think the internal monologue is probably best kept internal. Otherwise, everyone would just go completely nuts. So yeah, this is one of these things that, again, I think is going to settle down eventually. And I think the transfer windows, which they have implemented, which ends on January 19th, you'll at least have, everyone kind of take a deep breath, and then you have a couple months where there's not going to have transfers, and things will sort of settle themselves out, and then it'll reopen again after spring ball. I think this stuff is going to sort of settle down, and it's not quite as insane as it feels right now, but it does feel pretty insane right now.
I think your truth serum idea is interesting. They should have to say exactly what is on their mind when they commit. And it would be like, for the next 3 years, as long as I play, as long as I get what I want, as long as there isn't a better NIL opportunity for me somewhere else, I am taking my talents to this school. But I also have the opportunity, each year to revisit this and tell you why I decided to go somewhere else and why somebody didn't hold up their end of the bargain. And, just let's all be honest in this. And the idea that you're going to be anywhere for 5 years, even the most likely people to be around for 5 years are offensive linemen, like projects, not necessarily projects, but offensive linemen. They're the only ones who are like, yeah, it's going to be 5 years if you're good enough to be kept for 5 years. Because even those guys, a lot of the fifth year guys, you're like, we knew 2 years ago you weren't going to play. I wish you would have left. So it's becoming a more honest sport with all of the back dealings, which is crazy to think.
Well, I think a lot of the stuff is a little more out in the open right now. And, when you say it's an honest sport, I still think the vast, vast majority of NIL numbers and all that stuff that gets floated is complete garbage. Like, I think Pat Narduzzi floating that, Drake May had 2 schools offering him $5 million. Like, no, I'm sorry. That is absolutely not true. Like, come on. But, some of the backdoor dealings and under the table shenanigans that have been going on for decades and decades are now a little more out in the open. And, with Deion Sanders at Colorado putting some of that stuff out when he first got there, that was just basically like, yeah, if you're not good enough, get out. Like, that is not the first time that meeting has happened in college football history. It might be the first time that a coach has put that out on video, but that is not the first time that conversation has been had. Like, we talk about coaches having, air quotes, the conversation with guys after spring ball, like, hey, buddy, this might not be working out for you. That has been going on at pretty much every program across the country for decades, generations. It's all happening a little more out in the open now, and I think people are fighting, well, this is terrible. This isn't what college football is. It's like, this is kind of what college football has always been. You just have not had to look directly at it for a while. Yeah,
it's the first time that somebody has ever checked the box. Would you like to monetize this video? Yes, I want to monetize this video of a coach telling players to get out and get lost. You're not good enough to be here. We don't want you here. Is there any ads that are not suitable for children? This video is not suitable for children, but that's besides the point. So yeah, that level of newness is interesting. I will say, and last night, me and Mark Givler and Kevin Noon did a 2-hour stream. I think you can find that. You can find that at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. You can also find it on Mark's. If you do a search for the Skull Session podcast, it should be there as well. Mark's out in San Antonio covering the All-American Bowl, so we talked to him about a lot of that stuff. What's going on out there? Also, 2 hours of Buckeye talk as well. And one of the things we talked about is the NIL keeping maybe a first-round quarterback for another year. Kenny Pickett was the number 20 pick this year, made about $2.5 million. If say Kyle McCord wins the job and is you start for a year and then you go to the NFL, you're projected as a first-round pick, but knowing that 2 years of starting in college makes you a better NFL player and makes you more likely to succeed, a guy like Kyle McCord wouldn't necessarily have to take the NFL money. He could take $2 million, $2.5 million from collectives, stick around, get that second year, and then be much better set up for success after college. And it's another instance of maybe my thought was like Ohio State's just going to be churning through quarterbacks. Devin Brown may be a 2-year starter, may not be, because of the way things are set up. It's Kyle McCord starting for a year, goes pro. Devin Brown starts for a year, goes pro. And maybe you can keep one of these guys for 2 years. And if Devin Brown wins it, you're definitely keeping him for 2 years. But it's just an interesting situation where NIL could actually keep a first-round quarterback, which you would never thought before. It's not going to keep C.J. Stroud because he's going to be a little bit higher, but the money's not that far off from a second half first-round guy to a starting college quarterback at Ohio State.
Exactly. And then you're potentially, it's not just that first year, it's the guaranteed money that you get if you're the 5th overall pick versus the 20th overall pick. That is a substantial difference. And at this point, the NIL money essentially functions the same way the old loss of value insurance you always you heard about quarterbacks. Well, I'm going to come back, but I'm going to have an insurance policy in case I get hurt. Well, your insurance policy is you're making $2 million or whatever it is this year. And again, I think the number of college players who are really making multiple millions of dollars is in the small, maybe single handful kind of number. But, even if you're making $1 million this year, as opposed to $2.5 million in the NFL, with the potential upside of then making $15 million more if you have another good season, that's a relatively, those scales can balance pretty easily if you want them to, depending on how you want to weigh future value versus present value. But yeah, this is the stuff that it's changing every decision these guys make. It's just, I don't want to spoil any surprises because, Tony, NIL is not supposed to be play a factor in recruitment. That's only supposed to be after you sign so there's no inducement there. So let's not, confuse anyone with that. But I mean, hypothetically, if there was a bad actor out there who was using it in terms of recruitment, it might play a factor in where you go to college. It might play a factor in whether you stay after your first year or whether you go to Texas and go, have kombucha and play in the Alamo Bowl. It may play a factor in whether you come back for your third year. And, this is also like in the Major League Baseball draft, guys who have leverage and who can come back can get more money out of teams. If you are picked after your third year of college baseball and you have the option to go back to school for your fourth year, well, you can tell them, well, you either meet my number or I'm going to go back to school. If you are a fifth year senior, you got to sign for whatever you sign for. So this is kind of a little bit the opposite, where if you have the leverage of coming back, but you also potentially could go to the pros, you might be able to leverage a little bit of extra NIL money out of your school to stick around for another year. So yeah, it is fascinating how this has kind of changed every, the decision making at every possible level of a guy's career going through. I'm trying to picture the the career mode or whatever it is on the new NCAA game when it comes out in 2024. You're going to have to, it's not just going to be where do you want to go to school and what position are you going to play. It's going to be, do you want to take NIL? Do you want to transfer after 1 year? Do you want to transfer after 2 years? Do you want to go pro after 4 years? Do you want to come back? And boy, there's a lot more decisions there that are getting made.
Yeah, and if you want to say you transfer earlier in your career, you can either you'll have to do something to graduate. So they'll probably have you test your academics at some point in the game, some true false quizzes. I don't know. Or maybe if you're just a bad actor during the course of your career and you want to transfer a second time, coaches aren't going to grant you a waiver. Like schools aren't going to grant you a waiver. But if you have some quests where you're a nice guy, hey, you know what, you go ahead. We'll go ahead and grant you your waiver, and then you can just play somewhere else, each year. But yeah, there's going to be inducements there. It'll be interesting to see how all of that plays out. And that's probably why they had to put it on hold for you. It's like, this is an entirely different game now. I thought we were doing a football game. This is like a fantasy quest game now.
Yeah, this is it's like a choose your own adventure at this point, to enter the transfer portal, turn to page 52. So yeah, this is one of these things where it is an entirely different college football than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and everyone's saying, oh, it's ruining the sport of college football. And guess what? On New Year's Eve, in the middle of the fourth quarter, college football was still pretty good. So, I think everyone can sit there and say this is ruining the sport, and then, and then the game kicks off, and then it turns out college football is still pretty fun. And so, I think I have a feeling, all the people who said that, well, if the players ever get paid, I'm never coming back. I'm never watching another college football. Okay, have fun. Have fun watching the NFL. That's way better.
It is so not. But anything else, Tom, before we get out of here?
I think we've covered enough, because this feels like the time of year where we could just do a 6-hour show at some point. And, I don't feel like I have time to do a 6-hour show. We got to cover a basketball game tonight, so don't really have time for a 6-hour show. I will tell you, I watched just a little bit of the live stream you guys did on Wednesday night. It was really, really good. I think we may drop that. You can find that in the Skull Session podcast feed. But we may drop that at some point as a bonus episode on Buckeye Weekly, because you guys, it's Kevin, it's Tony, it's Mark. You guys will love it. It was really, really informative. And Mark, I'm going to have Mark on the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning show this weekend as well to talk about some of the stuff he's gotten to do down there in San Antonio. But you can probably assume you can look for that as a bonus episode sometime this weekend on this podcast feed as well, because it was one of those things where I genuinely think you guys would really enjoy it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So look for that. But I want to thank you all for joining us. As always, find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. Say hello to us there. Love to talk to you there. Also, YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't. Hit the bell to be notified. Hit the thumbs up on this video if you're watching it right now. That helps us as always, and it's free to do. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you guys later.